it's the cultural pieces of that that come with knowing a second language and having experienced another language, another culture, another way of life that really opens those doors and opens your eyes that, we all may be different in many ways, but really people are people no matter where you are. The outside part might look different because that's the culture part, but the inside part is going to look just the same because we're all people.
Hi, I'm Nora Jones. Welcome to It's About Language. This podcast connects language and culture to life, learning, and hope. You'll experience insightful conversations with creative leaders in the fields of education, business, arts, and science. My guests shed light on the impact of language and culture on individuals and society as they share their stories and experiences. You'll be informed and inspired as we explore how language and culture make us human and bring hope in the midst of a challenging world. And it is my great pleasure for the podcast today to welcome my dear friend and colleague, Debbie Callihan-Dingle, Northeast ISD in San Antonio, Texas. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Nora. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
You are most welcome. I am delighted to have you here. And so thank you for gracing us and honoring us with your presence. And Debbie, you are a person who has had a lot of and still does have a lot of leadership positions, including being current president of the National Association of District Supervisors. That acronym NADSFul, I'll go ahead and put in the conversation here, as well as having served as president of the Texas Association of Language Supervisors. And you have a real commitment to leadership and vision. What you have challenging times in front of you with leadership in world language and everything else, Debbie. What are some of the aspects that are especially challenging for you right now as a leader, in this case in the world language field?
Wow, Nora, that's such a great question. I think anybody in a leadership position right now, um, I'm going to switch that and say anybody in education right now, I think is certainly feeling the stress of everything that is going on. I think that that's a pretty heavy burden to carry right now. But I think in a leadership position, um, you have the added responsibility of making sure to take care of those people that you are working with and that you are leading, and that's not a light burden to bear necessarily. And so um I'm experiencing that on multiple fronts. On the professional organization front with NASFL, um, it was, at the beginning of this pandemic, we really rushed to be able to provide resources for our membership, uh, to be able to use with their teachers because we were having to turn everything on a dime and everything was turned upside down and inside out and backwards. And so we were really working on that. But I think then on the day to day, the everyday job kind of side, working with my world language departments here in the district, um, it's been I've seen what I've had as a leader. I've had to morph what I'm doing depending on the situation, and we've gone through so many different situations in the last 7 months. We started with, as I said, everything being topsy turvy. And in that point, um, I really had to take on being in front of the group and leading the standard and forging forward and giving them the path to follow, which is I'm very comfortable doing, but is not necessarily in my um, everyday approach to leadership. I like to be
Mm.
more inclusive
Mm-hmm.
in my decision making and pull people in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I started in that way, but then I have morphed a little bit to now going back to my style where I'm trying to lead from behind or with behind and push people forward, um, in these challenging times. But it's really about finding the balance between when do you need to be up front, when do you need to be in the middle, and then when can you be in the back, pushing people forward.
That's really interesting finding that balance. And you mentioned about its burdens, especially for leaders, but you started out by saying that it's burdens on for education in general. What are some of those burdens, and how have you begun indeed to analyze when to be in the middle, when to push from behind?
So some of the challenges that our teachers are facing right now is, across the country we're all in various stages of virtual instruction, and with some people being 100% virtual, some people being almost everybody in person, and then everything in between. And I think teachers having to be able to find the balance between, well, how do I teach virtually while I still have my these kids physically sitting in my classroom? Um like how do we do all of that? And so I think that's the challenge, just by the nature of this being a virtual situation. Instruction doesn't move as quickly as it does when you're face to face in a classroom, and that's another adjustment that we've had to make. To the second part of your question is, when how do you know where to lead from? um I think is I don't know if there's a really a formula for that,
Mhm.
but I think you have to look at the situation in general and decide, well, here we are in crisis mode. In crisis mode, people tend to need somebody out front and saying, okay, here is my recommended path. This is what you can do. And in the day to day running of things, when we're not in crisis mode, I very much strive to be an empowering leader, and I want my the people that I have working with me to work together and to help be a part of the decision making, because this is not my little kingdom where, I'm at the top and everybody does what I say. But it's really, my program belongs to everybody, and our world language program belongs to everybody. And those are the people that need to be um, empowered to make good decisions.
Thanks for describing that. And I loved the phrase that you just pulled out there, my little kingdom, or it's not my little kingdom. And I'm thinking as you describe, what are some of the nature of the leadership style that you are showing so that you are actually training the teachers who might think of their own classrooms as their little kingdom? When you're talking about empowering, how are you training teachers to take on that kind of leadership on behalf of the students in their classroom, their colleagues within a school, for example?
Another great question. So, what I like to do is to tap people that have potential. And I hesitate to put it that way because I think almost everybody has potential to fall into this role of being a teacher leader within the district. But um, not everybody is at the right time necessarily to do that, because it does take, being a teacher leader and stepping up into that role does take some additional time. And we all know that there are outside forces like family, or advancing your own personal education, or just, I'm just tired at the end of the day, I just don't want to do anything else,
Mhm.
that can certainly
Yeah.
say, you know what, this is really isn't the time for that. And so I look for people that are energetic. I look for people who are really committed to proficiency based instruction, and who are able to convey that enthusiasm and share that enthusiasm with their colleagues. Um and I like, uh, bonus points if they're already a good presenter for adults, um because most teachers are very, very comfortable in front of a student audience, but it's a very different
Interesting.
ball game
Yeah.
presenting in front of adults. And so, bonus points if they're good at it, but that's a not necessarily a prerequisite when I'm looking for a teacher leader, because I've um, that's a skill that you can practice and rehearse, much like language in the classroom, and develop. And so I can develop that part of a person, but it's really looking for people who are committed to the cause and committed to making sure that we give our students the best possible education and providing them the best possible opportunities for language learning in our district that we possibly can.
It's interesting you're talking about, if I might put it this way, an advanced level of proficiency of understanding and leadership within the classroom and beyond.
Hmm.
How do the teachers reflect that then in what they do with students? Is there a role for these teachers to be able to help students to have the vision of what it means to be proficient in a language, but also begin to take the responsibilities and commitments and vision seriously for themselves?
So I 100% on that statement slash question, because the our teacher leaders in our district are really ones that are truly committed to proficiency based instruction, and they're able to model that on campus for their colleagues and be role models for their colleagues and help them
Mhm.
understand a little bit more about what proficiency based instruction is. And while all of our teachers have been trained on it, um, and have resources to support it, of course they're all in various stages of their development of their various stages of proficiency of their proficiency understanding development. So it's nice to be able to have those teacher leaders who can serve in that role and serve in that support, because I can't be everywhere every day all the time. So then translating that into the classroom, I will say that we are very, very fortunate that I've had some tremendous teacher leaders the last 4, 5, 10 years that have helped to develop a what we use in the district. It's Proficiency 101 for students, and it is a series of proficiency lessons for each level, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that teachers can do in conjunction with our framework to help students understand the process of proficiency, how that differs from performance, helping the students understand that, you know what, after one semester in level one, you're not going to be fluent. And you know what? That's okay. You're going to be exactly where you need to be in your proficiency journey. So the teachers on my leadership team, and I have several different iterations of that and variations of that, are able to show their colleagues how to use these lessons so that we can then convey that same information to students so students can understand and reflect on their proficiency journey.
Beautiful descriptor of a process, Debbie. And I would like to broaden out a little bit and also bring in some of the references you had. Let's take a
Okay.
look on behalf of some of the listeners to this podcast would benefit from a little clarification which you just said that was important with regard to your colleagues, your faculty, namely the differences between proficiency and performance. But more than just a definition, although we could look for that too, is what's the vision that you are working with as a leader? Where are you looking down the road in using that? Where are you working to bring other leaders in your district to having that vision and helping others to see it? What's happening when you talk about proficiency, performance, and the vision?
So I really, in an ideal world, I would love for every teacher to fully understand proficiency and performance, and to be tied so closely to really focusing on students proficiency that it was all tied up nice and neat with a bow. But real life isn't like that. um, and we are governed by our state standards, and our state standards have proficiency goals at each level. And so That's ultimately, what we have to that's what we're accountable to and what we have to speak to. Um, and we just keep I keep hammering home the message. Um, we keep stressing how important it is um, to focus on the communication aspects of language learning. That it's not really about the the memorizing of vocabulary lists, with 150 words, and you just keep on
Mhm.
memorizing.
Mhm.
It's not about co- memorizing all these conjugation charts, although my concrete sequential brain loves conjugation charts. But, real life, I've never been to Paris and stopped on the street and been asked to conjugate a verb, which is what I always share with in professional development and with my teachers. So the trying to get people, it's a huge paradigm shift, to try to get people to understand that you can still communicate without having gone through that process of memorizing vocabulary lists, memorizing verb charts. Um, and it's where it's in some instances there may be a time where they have their place. I don't want to completely, well, I'll just stop there. But what we really need to do is focus on the communication, and then we can put the okay, well, now you know that the third person singular is this form. Okay, and this is what it looks like if you were actually looking at the verb. I mean, that could be for later for those few students who really care. Um, most of them don't. Most of them just want to get in and learn how to communicate, learn how to speak. Um, and that's our ultimate goal. And I'm going to tell a quick story because I would be remiss if I
Mhm.
didn't. That is my
Please.
daughter, who's almost 5, is watches a show, and they use vamonos. And so she's been running around the house saying vamonos, vamonos. And we were at the grocery store and she's like vamonos, pretending that she was riding a horse and had horses behind her. Vamonos. She knows exactly what it means. She's using it correctly. Um, she doesn't care that it's been conjugated and like it's where it comes from and all of its iterations. That doesn't really matter, but she's using it, she's communicating, and she's using it correctly. And
She's
I think we
not
need to remember that.
concerned that it's a first person plural imperative? Come on now, Deb. This is
No.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked,
I will
truly.
go home today, Nora, and I'm going to sit her down and I'm going to use her little whiteboard and I'm going to explain it to her.
You better and you make sure you have all of the forms when you get there too. Make sure
I
she
will.
learns them all at the same time. And the quiz next week, she's got to get a good. That's a great story, Debbie. Thank you so much for sharing that about your 5-year-old. Indeed, that's really where some interesting language insights come. Let me ask you then here, you are the president of a national organization, the National District Supervisors. You interact all the time with the national organizations. What kinds of impact does your vision and these aspects of leadership have on the national work that you are doing? What's the vision nationally for our education system with regard to languages and cultures?
Wow. Such a great question again. And this role has been a lot of fun, and I love that I've got colleagues to brainstorm with across the country and learn from, because there are some just very well educated and smart people across the country that I get to interact with NADSFul, and then piggybacking with ACTFul and all of the regional organizations. And so um, I just think that we are all in such it's such a pivotal place, because I think we can um we're in a position to be able to help be advocates for language learning across the country. And while I think language instruction itself is critical and important, I also think the advocacy piece, and I don't necessarily mean advocacy in a official I'm going to the Capitol, going to advocate role. I don't necessarily mean it that way, but I think
Mm.
representing world languages as a very necessary and very needed area of study is something that all of us in the world language arena can do and be an advocate at that level. I mean, we all know if you're involved with world language education, we all are very well aware of how little is thought of world language education in the United States. Um and it's we also are very well aware that it's not so much the language, while the language piece is important, it's not so much the language piece itself that's important. But it's all those other lessons that come with learning another language, and you have the cultural aspects and being able to have a deeper appreciation and understanding of people that are from a different culture than you are, and all of the it's everything that goes with language learning. um and that's a benefit to people, and I think that's what we need to be advocates for, is those lessons of understanding others and appreciating others, um and then of course of the language piece.
Speak to the United States. Okay, let's do it, right? Vision. Everybody's paying attention to you right now. No pressure there, Debbie. No pressure. When you speak to the United States, you're like, it's important, it's critical to know this, understand this, experience this, be like this, be aware. What is there? What preach to them?
Oh my goodness, no pressure there, Nora.
Not a bit.
So it is important to be able to, and like I said, it's not so much the language, although we certainly would all benefit from knowing a second language because that opens up so many other doors in terms of it could be in education, it could be in the workforce, but it's the cultural pieces of that that come with knowing a second language and having experienced um, another language, another culture, another way of life that really opens those doors and opens your eyes that um, we all may be different in many ways, but really people are people no matter where you are. And there's a great sense of um, I'm not even sure what the right word is, but there's a great sense of serenity, if you will, knowing that um, just because you have a different cultural background, and I taught French, just because you grew up in a French speaking background doesn't mean that you're fundamentally any different from me. And the outside part might look different because that's the culture part, but the inside part is going to look just the same because we're all people.
Powerfully said, Debbie. Thank you so much. Let's take a look at what's happening right now in the United States: pandemic, remote learning, changes of the ways that things are happening. What kind of lesson, if any, do you see coming for the United States with regard to the impact of understanding language and culture, world language and culture, when the United States, as others, emerges from this pandemic to face the next stage of our future?
Well, the first thing I would like to say to that is that as we emerge from this, I would love to see, and this is not world language specific, but I would love to see teachers be recognized and honored for what they and rewarded. That's the key part. We don't need to just say, give a slap on the back and say thank you, but I would hope that people would recognize that how the work that teachers have are doing and have done is so critical and so important, and that they would start reaping the benefits of that, um, financially, honestly, because um,
Mhm, mhm,
teachers are they are working so very hard right now to make sure that there's that normalcy for their students in this very um, not normal world that we're having. So that would be my first thing, and that's not world language specific, but
mhm,
it is
mhm,
certainly education specific.
mhm,
And then for world languages, I think the other piece of it, I think that there's that there the demand might be higher. I think that people are going to be um, hungry to get out of their houses once all of this is said and done. And so maybe traveling and recognizing that being able to have language, even quote unquote, just to travel, is important and essential. And then being able to, um, for anybody who's in a field of science and research, as they look at what happened, for instance, with the pandemic, and being able to look at the bodies of research that exist out there, from different countries, that and have been published in different countries and not necessarily in English, is also going to drive that need for language. And so I would hope that um, that need will be driven by some of the things that come out of the pandemic. The other thing is that is maybe generating that interest in the students to go and visit, either as study abroad or even just to travel. Um, because I do know there have been quite a few teachers who have taken their kids on virtual kids, and I use that in a nice way, but their students on a virtual field trip,
mhm.
to museums all around the world, and
Interesting.
to landmarks all around the world. And so it very well could end up on a student's bucket list to go and visit that, or say, I want to go study in Spain now because my Spanish teacher, showed us we went on virtual field trips here and there. So um hopefully teachers have used this opportunity, and hopefully students have used this opportunity to kind of pique their interest, and hopefully that'll translate into a greater need for world languages in the future.
Okay, I have one more for you. Okay.
Okay.
I always ask this of all my podcast guests is I'd like you to turn to the listeners now, and I'd
Mhm.
like you to invite them to do something, advise them to do something, charge them to do something. What would you say to the listening audience about something that they should think of, do, understand?
So, what I would say, and this is so much driven by the situation that we're in right now, but whatever your role is to I would challenge you to maybe write 5 little notes to teachers. And so if you're in the classroom, choose 5 colleagues and just tell them, "You know what? Hey, I think you're doing a great job," and tell them why. If you're in a leadership role, choose at least 5 or start with 5, and tell them thank you. If you're a parent, choose 5 teachers, tell them thank you. If you're a student, tell them choose 5. If you're outside in the community and you're not filling any of those roles, figure out a way to tell teachers thank you, because right now they are just moving heaven and earth to make sure that our students are served. And I will also think that world language teachers are, um, I don't know if they're necessarily working any harder or any other under any more stress than any other teacher, but I think, having to do what they're doing, but having to do it in a language that you're teaching, um, is presents its own set of challenges, which I guess Nora, that can be for another podcast.
Hmm,
Um,
it is. Interesting. It is. Interesting. Mm, 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 it is. Interesting.
but it's it's tough right now. So, um, that would be my advice is to imagine how good we could make everybody feel if everybody just acknowledged 5 people. And then in your note, you say, okay, I've thanked you, but now when you're comfortable, I want you to thank 5 more people because then that could be a contagion effect. Um, and that would be a lovely thing.
A contagion of kindness would
A
be
contagion of kindness.
would be transformational, and thank you for sharing that idea, Debbie. That's really tender, which is your style of leadership also. Your tender compassion comes through in everything that you've talked about and everything that you do and everything I've enjoyed watching you do over the years and so many people have profited by. So thank you.
Thank you, Nora. I appreciate that so much.
Well, it's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm going to now I feel very much not just compelled, but invited and happy to write you a thank you note.
Well, thank you. It can be email.
I'll write 4 others too, and if email, that would get me off the hook a little bit. I wouldn't have to go try to find stamps. So thank you for that, Debbie. Debbie, it's been a pleasure having you here on our conversation today. Thanks for sharing all that you have shared.
Well, thank you, Nora. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was I appreciate the invitation and I appreciate getting to participate in your podcast. So,
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. Keep up the good faith now. Thank you for all that you're doing with teachers, not only in your own district, but with teachers and supervisors and leadership around the country. Thanks again, Debbie.
thank you, Nora.
Okay, you take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Let's continue the conversation. Be sure to check out my website, fluencyonline.com, to learn more about our guests and to check out the resources and information they've shared with us there. I have other ideas, resources, and opportunities there for you too. Again, thanks so much for listening, and until next time,